Welcome to the We Get Outdoors podcast. My name is Rob Yates. I am your host, and welcome to this epic episode. Today, we get to meet professional whitewater kayaker Bren Orton. Bren uncovers for us what it's like to suffer severe brain injuries whilst paddling off one of the highest waterfalls in the world, what it took to become the holder of the British World Record for the highest waterfall ever kayaked off, and how you can become one of the most successful whitewater kayakers on planet Earth, no matter what your starting point is. We also talk about Bren's rant on veganism, even though he's a vegetarian. We talk about his travels all over the world, and we talk about what it is if you want to get sponsored, and many, many other things. So let's jump into this epic episode with professional whitewater kayaker Bren Orton. This episode is brought to you by the We Get Outdoors tribe, where your next adventure is just one click away. You can join this, the fastest growing outdoor group on planet Earth, and become part of a tribe of like-minded outdoor enthusiasts, sharing your adventures, their adventures, trips and insights, and helping to ensure you plan and have the most perfect adventures. Click on the link in the description below to join for free right now. Bren Orton, welcome to the We Get Outdoors podcast. Where are you today? What are you doing? And how's your world?
Cheers, mate. Good to be here. I'm back at my nan's house in Warrington, which is sort of my home base in between trips. And I'm just getting ready to go on my next one, which will be a 2-month film trip in Indonesia, trying to find some new waterfalls to drop off.
Cool. And for those who don't know you on the We Get Outdoors podcast, what are you notorious for? Maybe famous for? I don't know.
I mean, my tagline is I'm like a happy ginger dude, and I like to kayak off waterfalls and edit videos. You know, I think that best sums me up. Yeah. Not much more to it other than that.
And you get the ginger bit in there, otherwise somebody else will do.
Yeah, I think it's like a self-defense thing. But you got it.
Go on.
Sorry, after you,
No.
mate. Let's not.
Go on.
It's a nice off.
Do it. Tell me.
No, I was saying it's a nice off. You know, where you're like, no, after you. No, after you. I insist, sir. After you, mate.
So where did all this kayaking stuff start? How did you get into it? And how did you become a guy who's just about to go and do a film mission in Indonesia for 2 months?
I started out, so they took us out of the city, and we went to the Lake District in the UK, a beautiful bit of countryside, and we tried a lot of outdoor sports. And with the greatest respect to anyone that loves these outdoor sports, I tried hiking, but I was like 9 years old, and it was just a bit cold and sort of boring for me. And I tried climbing, and you had to wait for the climbing instructors to belay you down. So that was really fun for about a minute, and then you'd be belayed down. You go to the back of the line and wait 20 minutes for your next turn. I didn't really like that much, and I tried kayaking, and I was like, oh my goodness, this sport is so sick. And that was it, really. I was hooked from the beginning, and I just liked the way that I skidded across the water. I liked that everyone was really encouraging. You know, it wasn't like when I was playing rugby or learning how to box and people would shout at you when you made mistakes. People were dead supportive, and I liked that. And the whole attitude of the community and everything. And came back home and begged my mum for a kayak, and that's how it started, really. I got a 25-pound fiberglass. I don't even know who made it, but it was my pride and joy. It was red with yellow stripes.
Ah! So you started in a fiberglass boat as well. So you spend a few days paddling it and then a few days putting duct tape over it to hide the cracks and holes.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't advanced fiberglass kayaking. So I was just going out on the lake, and I was really careful with my pride and joy. So I didn't ever break it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But, like little kid, not doing anything adventurous in it. So they're pretty tough for that stuff.
And so how did you progress from the lakes and flat water rivers in your fiberglass kayak onwards to whitewater, freestyle, waterfalls, all that stuff?
I was just hooked. So, I was buying any book that I could about kayaking. I was Googling kayaking all the time and sort of finding it out for myself. And then I got taken down to like the local kayak club. And from there, it's really strong in the UK, which you can attest to, like there's clubs everywhere. And there are a bunch of people doing different things in the club. And on one side of things, there was slalom, which I did for like maybe a month or two, and it was a lot like the sports that I didn't like, you know, like strict coaching and like set ways to do things and all of this stuff. And then on the other side of things, there are these guys with tattoos, and they're like big and butch, and they're doing freestyle and going river running. And so on the one side of things, I have these like nerdy people focused on like seconds and all of this stuff in this rule book, and then on the other side of things, I have these like cool tattoo guys that just go kayaking and would just, they were so free and easy and chill. And I basically latched onto them. They were called the River Crew, and they adopted me and took me out in the early days, which was really cool. And like I say, mate, I was just so in love with the sport. That was all I did. You know, I would go kayaking at least 2 days a week to start off with on the weekends, and then I'd start going midweek, and then I'd start writing school letters to my mum, telling her that I didn't have to go to school, and then I'd start bunking like a day or two off a week. So then I'd be kayaking like 4 or 5 times a week. And yeah, I mean that's it really. I just went kayaking a lot, and early on, when I could only go 1 or 2 days a week on the weekend when someone would take me, we did some trips where we'd spend the time like chasing water, which again, I'm sure you've been in that situation where you drive over to one drainage and there's no water, and then you drive to the next one and there's no water, and then you check for another river and it could possibly go, but it's a little bit low, so you don't bother. And then you end up back on the regular one that you could have spent all day on, just because the daylight is running out. And for that reason, I started doing freestyle, because I was just looking for the ways to maximize my time on the water. So I could spend all this time running around the country trying to find rivers and maybe get an hour or two on the water, or I could just go to the Whitewater Park and I could get 8 hours of just freestyling and trying to figure stuff out.
So you're a Nottingham Whitewater Park boy then?
Oh yeah, park rat.
A park rat. How do you deal with the quality of the Trent water?
You know, for a while, I thought I was invincible out there because I've just spent so many years in it that I got really sick my first time, and then I didn't get sick for about 10 years after that. And and then I took a bit of a break from it, and it was really polluted one day after the heavy rain, after the storm drains seep all the gnarly stuff out, and it got me real good. I was like bedridden and puking for a few days. But ever since then, I've been good, and I think generally speaking, it is getting better.
Well, that's good. It went through a period of time where it couldn't get any worse, so that's amazing. And for those people who don't know, the Nottingham Whitewater Park is 500 meters long, maybe, with a whole series of features, waves, eddies, stoppers, holes, all sorts of things that you can progress on, learn on, and play on.
100%. The really unique thing about that Whitewater Park is it has the most water and the most depth to any park in the world, so it wants to behave like a river, and it's pretty special in that way.
Yeah, you can avoid smacking your head or breaking your paddle on the bottom there quite easily.
Yeah, mate, and just the way the water interacts, you know, like when you go to some of these parks, the eddies aren't deep enough, so you'll see them, like the water's going down, it's hitting the bottom of the river really early, much earlier than it normally would, and then it's popping back up in these weird boils and bubbles, and it's like, it feels like a flooded river, but it's not, because the water's really confused and whatever. Anyway, I find Nottingham has like a really smooth flow to it.
Yeah, those eddies are properly fast as well, aren't they? They're not for sissies.
In some parks, like Lee Valley, the Olympic Whitewater Park, and then Cardiff, you definitely I think the eddy's the most dangerous place to be in sometimes, because there's like 10 of you in there just getting swirled around.
I remember when I was kayaking in Nepal in the late 90s, I eddied out into this ginormous eddy to find that the eddy was like class 3 with its own waves and holes in it. And I was like, I eddied out for a breather, and that's definitely not what I got.
Yeah.
So go on. How do you transition from being Nottingham Whitewater River Rat boy to going to being mid-20s, British Waterfall Record holder, and paddling, frankly, some really scary shit? How do you transition that?
Thanks, mate. I think honestly, like anyone, I was working hard and putting the hours in. I loved it, and then I just got lucky with timing and opportunity. You know, I think that's a correlation between everyone I know that's successful, is they work hard and they get lucky. And I got really lucky in that the pro team in the USA, the Demshits crew, these guys are savages, right? They're just awesome. They party hard, they kayak hard, they're just trying to have a good time. They don't pay too much attention to rules or like stuff like that, but like they just do them, they have a great time with it. And they at the time had to do 6 weeks of competitions on the Colorado Pro Tour, and they would do pretty well at the racing, especially Dave Facili. I think he would even win some of the races. He was like the leader. And but at freestyle, they weren't doing that well. They were definitely not up there, like not with a legitimate chance of winning. And they saw one of my videos online. We kayaked with the same company, Piranha Kayaks, and they're like, "Damn, we'll just get this 17-year-old. We'll just get him to come. He'll do really well at the freestyle, and yeah, everyone's happy." And so they reached out to me, and it was hilarious, right? Because it was like literally one message backwards and forwards between myself and Dave Facili. It was like, "Hey Bren, we'd love for you to come on the pro tour in the States. Let me know when you can fly in." And I was like, "I booked my flight. I'll be there on like the 10th of May or something like that." And we didn't talk again for like 6 months until I showed up in Denver airport, and Dave wasn't there. I was like, I came out from the plane. I was really nervous. I had my bags and everything. I was like, big smile, show me you're not afraid, big smile. And so I walk out, and I'm just grinning like an idiot, looking for him. And all these people are like, does this guy need help? He looks like a psychiatric patient. He's just got this smile that won't go away, and this crazy look in his eye, like he's nervous. And anyway, Dave wasn't there. I had never exchanged a phone number with him. I couldn't get online to send him an email, and eventually I ended up borrowing some lady's phone and sending a message to another American kayaker that I knew. And she got in touch with Dave. She was like, "Dave, do you know you're meant to pick Bren up from the airport?" And he's like, "Ooh, was that today?" She's like, "Yeah, he's been in the airport for 6 hours." He's like, "Ooh, okay. We're on the other side of Colorado. Tell him I'll be there in 7."
Jeepers.
And there's like a big distance and time shock, I would say, when you go from the UK to America,
Mm.
So I thought he was talking in minutes. Like when I got that message, "You'll be there in 7," I'm like, oh, pretty exact number. I'd expect 5 or 10, but that's cool. He's going to be in less than 10 minutes. And then I was there for hours. And that's just the way, like those boys were off doing another river, not, like just being themselves, and it was hilarious. And I think Dave's been late to pick me up from the airport every time since then. It's sort of a ritual now. But anyway,
Sorry, go carry on.
No, mate, you're good. But anyway, I got to go with them, and at the freestyle, like totally held my own. Did all right, not as good as we hoped, but did all right. The differences in scoring and judges and all of that stuff, and pressures of a young kid and whatever. But we did all right. And then I got to go creeking with them, and it was my first time basically on anything outside of a whitewater park, and my first time in a creek boat, and it was just a baptism of fire. It was just trying to keep up with those guys is so hard, and I would mess up a lot, and I'd get trashed in holes, So like they would nail the line, and they'd pull the stroke at the right time. They'd just skip over it like it was nothing, and I would mess it up, and then I'd end up in the hole. But because I freestyled so much, and I had so much ambition to be one of these guys and not be a sissy and not let them down, that I would just wrestle my way out of this hole. And I actually didn't swim that much, all things considering.
I can just hear what the conversation going on in their head beforehand. They're like, Bren's got a decent role. He'll be solid. He'll be fine.
Dude, those guys are so supportive. It's amazing. I think that it's incredible, really. Like they were so accepting of me, and I think I owe Dave Facili so much, because that was like the catalyst for me to do what I do now, and for me to like understand other parts of the sport and what I want to do and all of that stuff. But I mean, Dave was just amazing. I think that, like, without sounding like a big-headed git, like someone less tenacious, someone with less fight in them could definitely have been put off kayaking for life in that first tour with some of the situations I got in. But they were so supportive, and they just let me go at it.
That's
And
amazing. It's what you need from people as well, is to put you in places where you wouldn't put yourself and then say, it'll be fine, follow me.
yeah, to a point. To a point, definitely.
And so you're, from my outsider's perspective, as somebody who used to be all right in a kayak and now is just a fat bloke, um, you and a few others are quite unique in the world. Dane and Caleb, and there's a few of you who managed to maintain your freestyle skills at a very high level, yet still push it on the river to a very high level. And that's quite uncommon, I find, in paddling. People tend to get quite specific into what their genre, as it were. How do you manage to stay on top of both?
Cheers, mate. I really appreciate it. I mean, that's what I'm always aiming for, you know, like the kayakers that stood out to me as a kid were the ones that could do everything. You know, it didn't matter what type of whitewater they were on, they just show up anywhere and they could do some cool stuff, whether that was waterfalls, waves, holes, you know, like whitewater parks. It didn't matter. Like if they got on water, it was just magic. And so I always tried to emulate that. And I basically switch in and out, you know, like I like going river running and going creeking until I'm starting to get sore from the impacts of waterfalls, until I call it a jar of brave, which you could probably understand this, right? So you go on a trip and you've got this imaginary jar and it's just overflowing. You know, you're like frothing and you're like, we're gonna drop off everything, put me in every scary situation you possibly can. It's gonna be awesome. I'm ready. And each situation you get into, it takes a little bit of that brave out of the jar, and it
Yeah.
and the jar of brave will refill, but it takes a while. And it's sort of like when you're playing Mario Kart, or you know, like one of those games where you've got a health bar and it keeps going down and it'll rebuild, but it'll rebuild slower and all of that stuff. So I like to go creaking until my jar of brave is empty. I mean, I like to go freestyle, which is way less stressful, and just let that rebuild and come back to me.
So how do you know when your jar of brave is getting empty?
I think for me, it's when my mind makes a switch from being keen and like being really positive in like every situation and every waterfall we look at, to eventually it gets to a point where I'm not as motivated to like get up and go and be cold and wet and scared and tired. And when I look at it, I'm like, but we've had a pretty good trip, and that, you know, if we mess that up, that might stop us from doing the next trip or like this or that. Whereas at the start of a trip, I'm like all guns firing, you know. I'm just like, I'm ready to go off anything.
Mm.
And so I think that's like a key thing for me to like bear in mind and work with, because I think that the times where I've got injured is when I've been trying to push past that. And I think that's a big part of it. Sometimes you do have to be ready to go. You know, that's the unique part of the sport. It's not like building a jump and waiting until you feel good. You know, you never quite know when the best water levels are gonna happen. You just have to be ready to go. And there's totally days where you push through it and they're amazing and you're glad you did. And then there's other days where you're like, you know what? I wasn't A1 that day. I shouldn't have done that. And now I'm hurt, you know? Um,
Yeah,
so,
because
but
you had a quite well viewed hurt off Alexandra Falls. Tell us about that and about your brave jar.
Well, that one was unique, right? Because Jar of Brave was totally full at that moment. That was like one of the first ones on that trip that we did. And
Mm.
for those that don't know, it's a 110-foot waterfall in the Northwest Territories of Canada, and it's beautiful. Like, it's such a nice waterfall. When we talk about a nice waterfall, we're looking for a, a, a lip that rolls. So it's not a steep 90-degree transition off a cliff edge. Like, the waterfall rolls off the lip on a much gentler angle, and that helps set your line. And it just makes it a much nicer and smoother ride down it. And so this thing had a really nice rolling lip. It was awesome. It was nice and big, everything. And I kayaked off it. And still to this day, I'm like, I'm so happy with how I kayaked off it. It was, when I look back on the footage, I'm like, that is better than I could ever have hoped for. You know, like that's like even sicker than I imagined it. I'm chuffed with that line. But unfortunately, normally when you drop a waterfall, you go really deep. You pop up quite far away from it, away from the danger.
Mm.
In the case of Alexandra, I went not that far under the water, and then as I popped up, I got hit by the curtain of water falling, and
Ow.
that hit me so hard, and smashed the helmet, and then slammed me onto the front of my kayak, which obviously was a hard object to hit, getting hit that hard by the water and my speed that my body was pushed forwards on. So there's like a gouge on the kayak, like this hard piece of plastic that my full face had made, like cut into the kayak. It hit it that hard, and the full face broke and stabbed me in the face. And then I had like some skull fractures, broken eye socket, brain bleeding, bunch of gnarly stuff, and basically didn't really know who I was for 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, so you had like lost your memory?
Yeah, it was wild, mate. It was really difficult for my friends to see because I was confused. I had no idea what was going on. I woke up in the hospital, and hospitals have those unique lights, that like unique tone.
Yeah.
And I woke up and I couldn't really see because my face was so swollen, but I recognized those lights, and I was like, oh, bollocks. And then I'm trying to figure out, I'm like, why are we in the hospital? I'm like, well, I think that I was last getting on a plane to go to Canada to do something. And then like over time it comes back, and it's like, oh, I was getting on a plane to go to Canada to go kayaking. I was getting on a plane to go to Canada to go kayaking off a waterfall. Oh, that must be it. I must have had a really bad line. And that was like my first question to my mate Adrian. And I was like, did I have a bad line? And he was like, no, it was a great line. I was like, and at that point, like the bruised and battered brain just couldn't understand it, could not fathom it. I'm like, but if I had a good line, why am I in hospital? And he's like,
Yeah.
and he's like, I don't know yet. And him and Dane and Caleb were watching the footage back, trying to figure it out, because to all intents and purposes, what they saw was like, nice, good angle. He was tucked up, the paddle was out the way. I don't like, did he hit some rocks or something? And it was Dane that figured it out about the curtain of water hitting me, because he's an absolute ninja with assessing stuff like that.
Mm.
Anyway, I think I spent like 2 or 3 days in that hospital, and then it was coming time for me to leave and whatever. And they're like, you can go home, or we can fly you to the other side of Canada, and you can go hang out with your mates over there, like mutual friends, like really good friends. And I was like, do not send me home, because I didn't want to see my mum. I didn't want I didn't want my mum to see me hurt. And so I got flown to the other side of Canada, and I remember this really vividly, right? I'm still so messed up, but I'm trying to be okay. I'm not trying to like show weakness or like any of that stuff, which is just how I was raised. And so they're asking me like, do you think you're okay to fly on your own? And I'm like, yeah, of course I am. And I'm like, where am I flying to? And all these like random questions, and I keep going back. I'm like, but did I have a bad line? And they're like, no. and I remember I remember walking into this airport, just like snippets, just flash, like snapshots, and Caleb's walking me in there, and Adrian and Dane have dropped me off, and they're circling the car park to avoid paying the car park fees or whatever. And Caleb walks me all the way to my gate, and it's a small airport, walks me all the way to my gate, puts a ticket in my hands, and he's like, this is your gate. He's like, when the other people get on the plane, you do that too. Liz will be there to pick you up when you get off the plane. I was like, cool, no worries. And he's like, do not move. He's like, stay at this gate. Don't go anywhere. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I need to go to the bathroom. And I was like, ooh, really need to go to the bathroom. But I was told not to move. But I'm going to pee myself. I need to go to the bathroom. So eventually I find the bathroom, go for a pee, walk out of the bathroom. And I'm like, what am I doing in the airport? I'm like, I'm getting on a plane to go on a trip to go kayaking off a waterfall. Like that memory kicks in, and so I'm like, ooh, I have to find the right gate. Don't want to miss this opportunity to go kayaking off a waterfall. And somehow, by some miracle, I guess they must have called my name or something. They must have called my name and seen me wandering around looking lost and helped me onto the plane. And somehow I got on the plane, and then I don't remember much else.
That is incredible. I'm amazed they let you out of hospital.
Mate, I was pretty ready to go. I think that a clear sign of like a concussion and brain injury is being irritable, and I think I'm naturally, I struggle to contain that sometimes. Like when things aren't happening as quickly as I want, then I can be pretty irritable. And that was like what was happening with the hospital. And then like on top of that, the irritability from the brain injury. So I think I was pretty ready to go. Like I was like, I'm fine, I can walk, like blah blah, blah. Look at me, I'm fine, I'm not confused at all. And I think I just like pushed myself out of there. Um, I think the hospital would have kept me in much longer if it could have.
And so, how do you come back from something like that? Because I mean, the video footage I've seen, the boys pulling you back upright in your kayak. You've been under the water for quite a long period of time. You're definitely not that conscious. How do you go from that back to boating like you are today?
Oh man, I mean, the key thing is that I didn't know. I was so confused for so long. I didn't know. I couldn't put into reality what had happened. All that I knew when I was staying at my mate Liz's house and they were helping me recover or whatever is that I had this burning desire to go kayaking, and I had no idea of what a hideous it had been or how serious it was. All I could understand in my head is that I'd taken a knock to the head and I really wanted to go kayaking. And I was like, I'm fine. These guys are just being sissies. You know, everyone's so scared of concussions and all of that stuff these days. It's like, meh, I'm fine. And I remember asking them if they would go kayaking with me, and they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, "No, you have a skull fracture. Your eye socket's half healed. Like a week ago, you were unconscious, and Adrian thought you were dead." And so they wouldn't go with me, and I was like, I need to find some better friends. Whereas in reality, they'd like split the cost of flying me over and they picked me up from the airport and just babied me and helped me like feed myself and look after myself and kept me company for the last week. But I just couldn't understand why they wouldn't go kayaking with me. And so I ended up walking the 3 miles myself, like carrying my kayak from my mate Liz's house to the Ottawa River, and got on the water and went kayaking. And everyone came back from work and they were like, why is your hair wet and why is your kayak in a different place? And I was like, well, I went kayaking. And and they were like, you did what? And everyone was furious with me, which again I just didn't get. I didn't understand how serious it had been and the accident had been and everything. And now I understand, and I've apologized several times. But you know, like those poor buggers went from like, Bren's got a brain bleed, you know, he might die, to like, Bren's got a brain bleed, he probably won't die, but he might not be the same person ever again, to like, actually we think he's gonna be okay. All the way, you know, and then like, just don't let him hit his head again, and you know, look after him, make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. And so when I was going kayaking, they were like, you idiot. But yeah, mate, I mean to summarize, I think that just how I was raised and like my nature, you know, but if I get hit and I get knocked down, there's no way I'm staying down. There's no way that I'm not working to come back stronger from it. So when I could understand what had happened properly, then I was just motivated to like do a complete reset, work on all my weaknesses, and just come back stronger from it.
What were those weaknesses that you worked on in that transition period?
For me, it was like the mental process, and the biggest thing was allowing myself to not be vulnerable, but to listen to that inner voice, that phonological loop in your head. You know, it's that annoying voice that sort of makes sense in situations. You know, it's the like, ooh, don't know about doing that. That could be bad. And I always talk about just overpowering that voice. You know, I would split it into like brave Bren and sissy Bren, and brave Bren would be like, shut up, sissy Bren. It's got water going over it. We're a kayaker. We kayak on water. We'll be fine. We're going off it. And, you know, that gave me a lot of successful descents down stuff, but also left me hurt and whatever. And that was like a big thing, was like, learning to listen to myself more, like learning to identify those points where I feel good and I'm at peace with everything, and I know that when I get out on the water it's going to be a perfect line, and I'm not trying to force it, I'm just letting it come to me. That was the hardest thing. And then aside from that, there's some technical skills like holding the paddle longer down waterfalls, not tucking up as early, spotting the landing more. There's like a key thing as well that I got from some waterfall kayakers in the PNW, and that was like getting the head all the way down, because I come from a boxing background, and you know from that it's the punch that you don't see that knocks you out. It doesn't have to be the biggest punch if you don't see it coming. And so when I was tucking up for waterfalls, I was keeping my chin up and I was staring down that landing the whole way, and not tucking as forward as I possibly could, because I wanted to see that point of impact and brace at the right moment to mitigate that. But that also leaves you more exposed, leaves you to actually take more of an impact. So now I've started putting that chin down and getting really tucked forwards.
Okay, cool. So you got yourself that also protects your spine quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you were to land flat, that's definitely the way to go.
And so you go from there, and then is it Big Banana Falls? Is that your biggest one, the British Waterfall Record?
Yeah, mate, that was before Alexandra and all of that stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us about it, because that's a stupidly high waterfall, by the way.
Mate, it's beautiful. So it's 128 foot. It's on the Rio Alseca River in Mexico, and you put in one of the best sections of rapids and smaller waterfalls is just downstream of that. It's amazing. And so you run this section named after the waterfall. It's called the Big Banana Run. And I would I'd been to Mexico before, and I put in there every single day and gazed up at this thing. And it was very early on in my waterfall career, and I was like, oh, we're not ready yet, but one day we're going to fly off you. And December, when the good time to go to Mexico for those waterfalls and those runs came around, and I'd had like a breakthrough year, like I felt like unstoppable, and I was like, really want one last something before Christmas, and January comes around and things take a bit of a slower turn. And reached out to my mate Adrian Mata, and I was like, dude, I think we should go to Mexico, and I think we should run Big Banana Falls. And he was like, yeah, I'm in. And we flew to Mexico, and this is like, Adrian had always been a good friend, but we flew to Mexico, right? And I think we both had right around £1,000 or €1,000 in our account, because Adrian's German, so he's in euros. And the flight was like £875, right? So we spent almost all of our money on that. And when he made that pact to go to Mexico with about €100 in his back pocket, that was when I was like, you know what, this isn't really like friendship anymore. This is like some like brotherhood, like commitment. It's cool, like I don't know many people on the planet with that level of loyalty. So we rock up to Mexico, broke as a joke. The Renenzo family look after us. They own Adventrek, which is a local hostel to stay there. It's magic. And so they helped us get to the water and all of that stuff. And it's that area of Mexico is, it's everyone's really friendly, everyone's lovely, but there are cartel operations going on there. And we were a little bit scared of that. And then also finding the entry to the falls, you have to go around all these back roads through all these plantations and then go crawling through the jungle to find it, at least your first time. And it was pretty nerve-wracking to do that. And we were waiting for a guy that knew where it was. He had been with Rafa and Aniol, and they had done it before, but he was busy, and we sort of kept getting fobbed off by him so he could go do other things. In the end, I was like, all right, I'm just going to find it myself. Went on Google Maps, found the river, went up the river, found the waterfall, went to the next nearest road and just drew a line. And we went and found it. And that was like the big thing, but we couldn't actually see the waterfall because it's in a deep canyon. So you've got to abseil in if you want to do it. The part of the river above the waterfall is just infested with trees that have fallen down from the jungle, so it's not really kayakable. And so we had to abseil down it, and I'd never really abseiled before. Adrian had done a bit, but nowhere to the point where we could set it up ourselves. And this local kid, Walker, had all the equipment or whatever, and he ended up helping us out and setting it up. And it was wild, but I went down there, saw the lip, and figured out that, you know what, it was not ideal water levels for it, but I could still make it happen. And went back up the rope and was like, yep, tomorrow it's on, let's do it. And Adrian was on the fence a lot longer than I was, and then the day came around, he was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm coming too. And kayaked off it, and yeah, mate, it was just stunning, because you go from this really, really dark, jungle corridor completely on your own, and you come out and you go over this amazing horizon line. It looks like the edge of the world. It's 128 foot tall. It's wild, and it's got these converging currents on the lip, and I knew that was a make or break point. You know, if I made it through them and I kept the boat flat and stared down the landing, all would be well. And I came through the currents and they didn't mess with me, and the boat was flat and I could see the landing, and I was like, yes, now I can just enjoy the free fall. And the biggest drop I'd done from that point was 90 foot. So this thing was like
that's a lot bigger.
much bigger. So I tucked where I would tuck for a 90 footer, just, I don't know what it is, muscle memory or whatever. And I tucked and I was like, ready for the impact. And I was like, don't feel anything. And I was like, oh my God, we're still falling. and as I thought that, bang, huge impact, paddle broke or whatever, but still in the kayak. And before I could even think, I'd hand rolled up, which I was amazed about because my hand roll was rubbish. And I was just so stoked that I didn't flounder at the bottom of this thing after a good line and swim in the flat water. And so I hand rolled up, and I was just so stoked, mate. Like, just absolutely, like, happiness on a different level, you know, and satisfaction. I was so relieved.
And then you get to go and see one of your best mates do it as well.
Yeah, I was so nervous for Adrian. I was so nervous, not really for any good reason other than just caring about this dude, you know, because like I say, it's like a friendship on another level, you know. And anyway, it was really nerve-wracking waiting for him. And he had a much healthier line than I did. I had like a safe, what I would call like a safe line, you know, like nothing out of the ordinary happened. Like I went down, set the angle, tucked up, pretty standard. Adrian got sort of wobbled by the curlers on the lip, and then the nose of his kayak started coming up, which is, as you know, is really bad for any listeners that don't kayak. You're trying to, when you go off a waterfall, you're trying to land as vertical as you can so that you pierce through the water and you deaccelerate as slowly as you can. And if you don't do that, then all that input, all that speed you've built up decreases really quickly, and that's when you get the huge impacts. It's a little bit like if you go to a swimming pool, you can dive off the big diving board, it doesn't hurt. But if you just belly flop off the side, it stings and it hurts. And it's that same thing about decreasing your speed slowly or quickly. And I watched his nose coming up, and I was like, oh my goodness, no. And he brought it down and set it down and had a stick line. I don't think he even flipped at the bottom. It was crazy bit of skill and maneuvering in the air.
That's phenomenal. You're just putting shivers down my spine at the idea of a big drop and the nose of the kayak popping up. And and for those who don't listen, it's like, where does the energy get dispersed through? Because it gets dispersed on a vertical axis. So does it get dispersed back up through the kayak if you go in vertically, or does it come up pretty much up through your spine as the next logical vertical axis? And you don't want the spinal one, that's for certain.
No, 100% no.
Okay, let's move on before my back starts twinging. So earlier on when we were speaking, you mentioned that you got to go abroad and go boating with the Dem Shit Crew because you were all linked to Piranha Kayaks. And I still to this day, you're sponsored by Piranha Kayaks. We'll give them a quick plug in there again, Piranha Kayaks. People often ask me, I was sponsored as a paddler for a long time. Like, people often ask, how do I get sponsored? How do I get free stuff? Blah, 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 blah. Like, what advice can you give those people?
I think that, unfortunately, my advice is never what anyone wants to hear, you know? Like, they want like a magic bullet and an email address to get all the perceived free stuff. And the status that goes along with it, you know, the perceived perception is that if you're sponsored, then you must be really good and blah blah blah, and all the things that go through it. And sometimes that's true, but a lot of times, a lot of the boys with the top sponsorship deals are not the sickest kayakers in the world. Sometimes that's different, but there's definitely people out there that make a good living from the sport, and I'm like, how are you doing this? You know, like I don't look up to you or like the way that you kayak per se, and you're making some money and whatever, but not to be a hater. But anyway, my advice to my advice to people wanting to be sponsored is to figure out what gear you would use in a dream setup. You know, like a lot of people, when they talk about sponsorship, they lower their expectations and they go to a company that doesn't make the dream equipment, and then they settle for that. And I don't think that's a good way to do things, because you know something out there is even better. You just don't consider yourself good enough to interact with that brand or whatever. So my advice is to find your dream brand, figure out your dream equipment setup, and if you think you're good enough, then approach them. And the best way to do that is to go to an event and meet someone in person. Much better than sending an email, because as anyone involved in industry can attest, they get hundreds of emails each day from kids wanting to be sponsored. And then and so that's my big thing, is like, go meet the people in person and talk things through, and just keep, you know, like focus on the kayaking, not the sponsorship deals. Like, just if you get good enough, people will notice. And I think that's a much better way to conduct things than trying to force yourself on people, you know, to flip it to be like so good but they're like, oh my goodness, you know, like, come talk to us, you know, let's work together, let's be involved. And my last bit of advice would just be to understand that it's not for free. You know, like, no one is giving me my salary or my equipment based on me just going out there and having purely a good time. You know, like, but while they appreciate that and they're happy for me, they also want the return on their investment. And I always make sure that I try and over deliver with all of the people I work with.
I think something that you do very well is that the sponsors also like to sponsor really nice people, like generous people who are generous with their time, their effort, their energy. And you don't necessarily have to be the best boater, but if you're the sort of paddler who will give away his paddle temporarily to somebody to have a go with it, who doesn't have a shiny Werner paddle or whatever it might be, that means a lot to sponsors. I remember when, do you know Danny Mungo?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
The man.
so, the man. So I was coaching at an event with Danny. Danny was there representing Werner at that point in time, and I paddled back into a sea kayaking event. And I paddled back into the beach just outside Portland, Oregon, and I was paddling somebody else's kayak with somebody else's really shit paddle. And he asked me what the effing hell I was doing using that, and I'm like, because I've given my boat and my paddle to this guy over here because he wants to try it. And the following day, Danny came up with a paddle for me and said, well, now you've got two of them, so I guess you can keep using a Werner one. And and that was sort of the relationship, but it came out of generosity as opposed to being the best boater in the world.
100%, mate. But like, isn't that, I mean, that's just a testament to yourself and also to Danny of just how cool that is, you know, when someone in the industry recognizes that that's an important way to conduct yourself and rewards you for it. But yeah, mate, it's again, it's that like person on person contact that I'm on about. It's so much more effective than an email and leads to a lot of friendships and all of that stuff. But yeah, I think for myself, the biggest thing is like, I'm just a kid, like I'm just like a young dude trying to go kayaking and have a good time. Like I'm not trying to be this prima donna sports athlete or anything like that. I'm just trying to have a good time and go kayaking. And anyone that is on the water trying to do something similar, then I have something in common with them, and I'm more than happy to talk to everyone. You know, like I'm not trying to be exclusive in what I do. I'm just trying to have fun on the water.
That's so good, because paddling went through a day, probably when you were quite young, where the best paddlers just spoke to each other and didn't speak to other people, and was very cliquey in that way. And that's quite off-putting if you're a young up-and-coming boater. Whereas if you could just paddle up to Bren Orton and give him a high five and ask him a question somewhere, that level of inclusivity is really important for young up-and-coming paddlers.
Yeah, mate, I think so. And I actually remember that when I was a kid, of like seeing people that I would look up to on the water, and I'd like smile and nod at them, you know, like not confident enough to go and strike a conversation, but I'd like acknowledge them and they would just completely ignore me. And I remember those feelings. So now I make a point to like talk to everyone, smile at everyone, you know, like I'm not trying to be this like serious guy on the water.
That's super cool. So we've spoken a fair bit about waterfalls. What do you think is next for waterfall paddling in whitewater kayaking, or what do you think the limit is today? Where do you think the limit can move to? What do you reckon?
I mean, the waterfall game is crazy at the moment because there's just so many people stepping up to it. And you know, like I would say 10 years ago, 60 foot was considered massive. You know, like definitely on that was like the realm of like where things started getting really big, and people were dropping bigger things for sure, but they were much easier waterfalls like Metlarco and stuff, which is a 80 footer, but it's really beautiful. It's got an easy lineup and whatever. It's not as hard as doing some of the 60 footers, but you know, now that's almost standard. You know, like a 60 footer is like just the beginning, and people are pushing so hard and all the time. But the waterfall game is crazy, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I don't think that it's necessarily the height. I think it's the characteristics of the waterfall that are going to hinder us and all of that stuff. And I think that there's rooms for advancements in safety technology for that stuff. You know, a little bit like racing car drivers. You know, like you don't have the airbags and the helmet and all of that stuff to go faster. You have it so that if you make a mistake, then you can come back and try and go faster again, and that mistake isn't the end. So I think there's room for equipment improvements. The height, I honestly don't know. I think it depends on the right person, seeing the right type of waterfall and having the right crew behind them. But yeah, I don't see a massive limit to the height, aside from like, I think right now 300 foot seems pretty unachievable. But you know, like mid 200s, I think is totally possible.
One of the limitations surely must be the right waterfall with the right setup to go into it, and also then the right exit at the pool as well. Because you end up with like we could look at Google Earth and find hundreds of thousands of 60-foot waterfalls around the world, probably to go chuck yourself off. But when you get to 200 plus feet, the number of those becomes quite limited.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And I think it's really funny. What we found is that there's not many in that ideal range to try and take it a little bit higher each time. You know, it's always pretty big jumps of like 20 to 30 foot between them all. You know, it's not like, you know, I assume that some of the lads hitting big jumps on motocross bikes or normal bikes or skateboards or whatever, they can increase things pretty gradually. You know, they can go hit a 10-foot gap and then a 12-foot gap and then a 15-foot gap and blah blah blah, all the way up to, you know, the massive gaps that people like Robbie Madison hit. But with kayaking, it's a little bit harder than that. And then you've got different characteristics and behaviors between all the different waterfalls you want to fly off. So yeah, it's tricky. But yeah, I don't think there's a limit to waterfall kayaking other than what sort of risk people want to take with the unknown. You know, like what Tyler Bratt did was out and out, I think, one of the bravest moments in human history, because he went 60 foot bigger than the last waterfall that had ever been run, which is a massive jump. You know, no one knew if the human body could withstand that.
And but not just that, like his planning and preparation and time spent before he did that drop, Paulus, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That his time and preparation and everything else, his crew he had around him, etc., beforehand. This wasn't like him rocking up at a waterfall and saying, "Today's the day. I'm just going to chuck myself off it." They spent a long time scheming and working on that before that actually happened.
Yeah, 100%. He did it in the right way. But yeah, it's still just so stunning. Still so brave to me to take that massive leap. But yeah, that was wild.
And still, how many years later are we now? And there's only been a few people who've actually gone and done that fall and done it at that height.
I think it's 10 years later, and 4 people have been off that bad boy.
So that you could argue. Sorry, Tyler was easily a decade ahead of his time.
With waterfall kayaking, yeah, I mean that was just like a stunning breakthrough. And I mean, in general, Tyler was amazing off waterfalls, but there's so many people that are now of a similar level to skill that Tyler was, that are capable of flying off these waterfalls. So that's what I mean. Like, as soon as you get more and more people doing something, then you get more and more incremental improvements, and everyone feeds off each other. So now I think is like a really exciting time for waterfalls. But also I think that people are starting to understand that a really big clean waterfall is perhaps not as rewarding as like a smaller, more technical one. You know, or not that I shouldn't say rewarding, but like it's a different skill level and a skill set to deal with like a nollie 40, 50 footer than it is to deal with like a perfect clean 80 footer.
Completely. Well, because one is just falling off the edge, and I won't say survival, but it can be a lot of survival involved. Whereas when that technicality gets harder, you've actually got to be a good paddler.
Well, yeah, totally. I mean, the crazy thing about waterfalls that no one understands is like it's such a minute set of skills to develop, and like every movement is amplified, and you've got your basic recipe for success, but after that, it's just feeling it out and really interacting with the water. So like not a lot of people get it, but it's definitely an acquired skill set to fall off it. I think it's pretty skillful to fall off a big clean waterfall, but I think it's even more skillful to deal with like an entry into it and then like a weird lip and all of that stuff. So I give more props to people going off like more technical, harder drops that are smaller than the people flying off big clean drops. Just for myself in my experience. But I think that the sport as a whole is shifting a little bit away from waterfalls, because I think we're so saturated with images of waterfalls, and I think that now the sport is moving in almost like a free ride direction.
I was just about to ask you about that. I was watching, was it an LA or somebody doing, I don't know, I'm just going to say Eskimo rolls off Spirit Falls on the Little White. Like that's the best way I can describe it. I'm sure there's a proper kayaking name for it that I can't remember. And I'm like, how on earth has the sport got to the point where we're doing that and sticking the landing and landing it upright? It's incredible.
Yeah, mate, it's absolutely stunning. So that trick's called a cobra flip, and
right.
that was invented by Aniol Sarasolses, whose nickname is the Cobra, and he's a savage. and anyway, I think that was like a big shift, and I think that even before that, like people were starting to use the river running kayaks, which are smaller. They're more like a bike you would use for slope style or something, as opposed to like a huge like downhill mountain bike. And people are starting to use those sorts of river running kayaks on harder and harder runs and trying to be a bit more freestyle orientated with them. And then Cobra went out and did that, and a couple of other breakthroughs from different people like Dane Jackson. And I think that is the movement in the sport right now is less waterfalls and more downriver freestyle.
On the subject of Dane Jackson, I woke up the other week, as you probably did, to see, in fact, you probably saw it before me, but Dane paddling that rapid on the Indus. Just talk the listeners through that and what it really means, because if you're not a paddler, you might not be aware. But I've watched it 5 times and I was still speechless now about it.
We got the sat phone message, and it came from Christoph Sturzer, who's really renowned, really, really sick kayaker. And I've been to Pakistan on the same river, on the same trip with him. So I knew that he knew the rapid. And the text just said, Dane just effing ran the looper. And if it had been any other combination of names, I'd be like, nah, they're confused. They don't know what rapid it is. There's no way anyone kayaked down that. What sort of kayaker do you have to be to think that would go? But then because it was Dane's name, I was like, oh my gosh, that actually happened. I honestly had to sit down and have a beer with Adrian, because we had been there 3 years ago, and it was higher water, but still it's like, so the Indus River flows in Pakistan between some of the highest mountain ranges in the world, and it's got some of the most powerful stacked series of rapids anywhere. And I would say some of the most rapids of any river that I've ever done. It's just like rapid after rapid after rapid. And the most serious part of it is called the Rondu Gorge. And everything gets bigger in there. But even in there's a couple of standout rapids, maybe like 4 or 5 of them. And then within that 4 or 5, there's one that manages to stand out one more time, and that's called Malupa. And it is absolutely the biggest, gnarliest, craziest rapid that has ever been dropped in this sport ever. It's insane. And for reference, the river flattens out right above it. It's flat water. It's basically a lake. And I was so nervous about making an eddy above it that I was like splitting a group of 7 into a group of 2. And I was like, all right, me and Adrian will go first. We'll be there ready to catch you. I don't want anyone slipping out the back of this eddy and going down this thing. And so I was scared to portage it. And I didn't see a line through it. I honestly, I didn't think that there was a way to kayak down it. And Dane went a few years later and looked at it and was like, nah, I feel good about that. And he sent it, and it was a stunning line. It was better than I ever thought you could do off that rapid, and he smashed it like it was nothing. And I think that there's been a lot of times where Dane has just cemented himself as the sickest kayaker ever, but this is just another time, you know, like the GOAT. He's just incredible.
If I had a hat, I'd take it off to him. Just is it absolutely. I've kayaked a bit with Daz Clarkson, and I don't know if you know Crazy Dave at all.
Yeah.
And those boys, I remember talking to them after they came back from an Indus trip a long time ago. We're talking probably 10 or 12 years ago, and they spoke of a rapid, and they're like, nobody's ever going to kayak that. It is just like, it's going to be 50 or 80 years before somebody has the skill level to do it. And when Daz Clarkson is speechless that somebody's done something, I'm like, holy crap, that's proper.
Yeah, that's what I mean with the waterfall things. You know, if the right person comes along and sees the right rapid with the right crew, then it will get done. And yeah, just mad props to Dame for seeing a line through that thing. It was crazy.
So I've got a burning question for you. You open to it?
Yeah, please.
How do you make it all work? Like, your YouTube channel, Senders, has you a video every week, or sometimes more than that, of you in a different location in the world. You were in Scotland, I think, last week, and you're off to Indonesia. How do you piece it all together, and what's happened from where you first started traveling about? I guess if you're anything like me, I labored on building sites, through to where you are today. How do you piece the bits together?
I mean, mate, I basically just worked my way up through the industry and got better and got more well known and stuff. But in between that, yeah, much the same as you. I work on the building site. I worked such a wide variety of jobs. It's hilarious, right? Because I worked on the building site. I was a receptionist. I worked in like a call phone, like a telephone help center for people when their internet wasn't working, which is the worst job I ever had. People are so mean on the phone. I was a grave digger, and I did some paid medical trials, and I was a video editor and a graphic designer. I did basically any job that would pay me money and allow me to save up the money for the next trip. I would get the money for the next trip and then quit, go kayaking until the money ran out, and then start again. And I mean that was like the only way to do it, you know. So and then on top of that, you know, because I guess I don't know what the word would be, promising, you know, like I was like a young kid that was dead enthusiastic and was getting better every time like people would see me at events or whatever. Then I had access to the managers and the company owners in the sport. So like, for example, Palm, I mean, like, I first met the marketing manager, Paul Robertson, when I was like 14. So it's like 11 years since I've known him. And that started off just like a really low-key sponsorship agreement. And it was just like, they saw me like shivering in like rubbish equipment, and they, just like what you're saying about giving that dude the paddle to try. And they sent me out like a set of equipment, and they were like, yeah, just try it, just enjoy it, and hope you stay warm and have a great time on the water. And that was like the catalyst, you know. And then I would hit Paul up anytime I needed new gear or whatever. And I was like the same as every other kid. I wanted to be sponsored, I wanted to be on the team, blah blah blah. So I would always hit him up about like joining the team or whatever, and he'd be like, you know, I think the best thing for you to do is to just focus on your kayaking, and we'll talk when you're older. and I think by the time I was like 17 or 18, and I was on the team properly.
You're like, I'm older now.
yeah, totally. It's been 2 weeks.
There's the Bren Orton impatience coming out. Look.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I think that's it really. Is it just worked whatever job I would do to make it happen, and then now I'm in this like wonderful position where it's basically my dream life. You know, like when I was 15 years old, running away from high school to go to Uganda, this was the dream and the lifestyle that I always hoped for and envisaged, is having a good core crew and flying around the world to sick pieces of whitewater and making videos. You know, it's always what I've wanted to do, and just so lucky that I get to do that now.
You just mentioned Uganda, which has been it was a second home for me for quite a while, and it's been a second home for you. What were your first impressions of the White Nile in Uganda, and how do you view the changes to the river?
Oh mate, it was mind blowing, right? So my first time I went out when I was 15, and it was the biggest white water that I'd ever seen, and I'd never experienced warm water before. I was like, this is amazing. And I just fell in love with it from that first day, of like paddling out in like the morning sunrise. The water's warm, it's massive, but it's really friendly. And you go out, and then there's like all the local peeps from a village are like smiling and like cheering you on and saying hi and all of that stuff. And then the white water is just incredible. You don't have to, like on some trips you have to worry about getting cold and taking food on the water and logistics and all of that stuff. And it was just so stress free, and you could just focus on the kayaking. It was incredible, and I just fell in love with the place, mate. It was magic.
And how is it today in comparison? Are you going to go back? Are you, for those who don't know, the White Nile's had 2 dams put on it on the sections that we used to kayak on, and that I suppose that quantity of available white water has decreased a lot. What's your views on those?
Oh mate, I'm devastated. Uganda was my, when you're growing up, everyone's like, oh, you've got other backup plan in case that doesn't work out though. Uganda was my backup plan. I was like, if everything goes tits up, I'm just gonna book a flight, fly out to Uganda with my kayak, and I'm just gonna hang out by that wave and surf every day. And that's my backup plan. And unfortunately, that's not an option anymore. I've got to find a new backup plan somewhere in the world. Um, but yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing about Uganda is that you had everything from class 2 to class 5, and you could go as big or as small as you wanted, and you still had the whole like environment and community and warm weather and warm water and all the amazing things about it. And then you could pick how hard you wanted to go each day.
Mm.
And you also had you had such a variety before that first dam. You could go, it was split into days, so you could go to the day 1 section, which is a bit more river running, or you could go to the day 2 section, which was a couple of really nice rapids, but then also like the best waves on the river, like Now Special and Malalu were down there.
Mm.
And then the day 1 section got dammed, and that was pretty devastating. But if you were really freestyle orientated, or you weren't that worried about variety, then it's still a great trip out there to go to the day 2 section. It's still magic. And then the day 2 section got dammed, and now what's left is really easy or really hard. And that beautiful middle ground that would allow people to just go and experience like huge, powerful whitewater in a friendly environment, like basically all of that is gone.
Mm.
And so now I think that you're either going to be a little bit bored and not challenged enough, or you're going to be really challenged out there, because you have freestyle spots like Super Hole and Real Deal, which are all right, but they're not that much better than anything you would get in the UK.
Mm.
And it's a long way to go for that stuff. And then on the other side of things, for the rapids, you have it's still big water, but it's not like the huge long wave trains that you would get. And then you have rapids like Dead Dutchman and Hypoxia and Itunda and Kalagala, which they all carry some consequences to them, some more than others, but it's not that, that like beautiful carefree middle ground is just gone, where you used to be able to just drop into this huge piece of white water and know you would be okay at the bottom. Now it's a bit more serious with the rapids that are left.
Yeah, those that you certainly don't want to be out of your boat swimming about in the middle of any of those rapids.
No, definitely not. But yeah, mate. I mean, it's just absolutely devastating, and the situation in those countries with, I think the dam was funded by China, but they, they basically came in and offered a bunch of money and then some, like a good deal on the dam in return for whatever, but they basically just bulldozed the way in there. I don't think it was ever on the cards for Uganda to put a dam there. It was only when someone came to them was like, oh, we could put a dam there, would generate this much power, blah, blah, blah. You got all these incentives, and, oh, you're in charge? Yeah, let's go out for a business dinner, and then they spoil these people that don't necessarily get spoiled in that way that much. And then one thing leads to another. And I think that the biggest thing that upset me about this is that there was meant to be like a World Heritage, like protected site right? Like a certain amount of kilometers on the Nile that was just untouchable. You know, like this
Mm.
place is a place of natural beauty and wonder, and we're not going to let anyone touch it. And I don't know who got involved or who pushed it through, or even if I'm remembering it correctly, but from my knowledge, they took the World Heritage Site of Natural Beauty and just moved it.
Oh,
So they were guaranteed, like, I don't know, 50K of like untouched pristine river, and they just moved that more upstream to a part of a river that is not as beautiful or like untouched and all of that stuff.
for me, it's not necessarily, you and I are very fortunate. We can jump on a plane and pretty much pick and choose where we go to in the world to go boating. So yes, we've lost somewhere that we loved and we were passionate about, but we can find other places. For me, the change on the Nile, it's really the local people who that money that went into building the dam and whatever else is never really going to filter through to. And all of that tourist money that we used to take and hundreds and thousands of other people used to take, that's just dried up now as a destination becomes less desirable. And I think that's the biggest crying shame for the White Nile.
And 100%, mate. You know, like those people that live by the banks of the river are some of the nicest, friendliest people you'll ever meet on the planet. And I think that, you know, I lived in that village next to Nile Special for like 5 or 6 trips because it was cheap and because it was closer to the wave and you could avoid the queues and all of that stuff. But you know, like, those people were amazing. It was such a good setup. You know, it's like a mutual benefit. I got to live close to the wave. They got to have some extra income. I got to see like a different culture. They got to experience a little bit of a different culture. You know, like I'd learn a bit of their language. They would learn a bit of my language. It was a really cool exchange of things, and it's pretty sad that doesn't happen anymore.
Mm. Hey ho. So what's your ambition? What next? I know you're off to Indonesia, but what next in your kayaking for Bren?
Yeah, I had a total reset after Alexandra, and
Mm.
I really like tried to pinpoint what I want to do. And although waterfalls are still really important for me, and this trip to Indonesia will mostly be big waterfalls, the side of kayaking that I'm really excited to push is that downriver freestyle thing, because as you said at the start, there's not that many people out there that have the skill set on both sides of the sport, and I want to take that and combine it and turn it into something of its own.
What does that really mean? What are you pushing towards?
I mean, still hard white water in like a smaller type of kayak, and just more tricks and more flowy down it, and just like trying to reimagine how to get down things. Because I mean, at one point in the sport, it was it was enough if you made it to the bottom, and then it was in. And then if you made it down upright, amazing. No matter whether you were forwards, backwards, sideways, whatever, half underwater. If you made it down and you didn't flip, amazing. And then racing got really big, and it started becoming not enough to go down it. You know, like you had to go down it fast and like squeaky clean, and not even get the top of your kayak wet, and you know, like all this stuff. And now what I want to do is take the sport and, like, you know, if you're not like vertical and like linking moves up or like trying to get aerial or something, then, you know, like why not? And that's what I want to put together.
And so if people want to go and see what you mean by that, they have to go and check out your YouTube channel, Senders, right? That's the YouTube channel.
Please, mate. So there's 2. So Senders is like backstory and vlogs and all of that stuff, and then the Send channel is where we put all the sick edits, and these are like predominantly 3 to 10-minute edits that we invest hundreds of hours on, whereas Senders is a bit more open and friendly and a bit quicker, and it's all the B-roll and stuff that doesn't get put into the Send videos. But if anyone wants to see what I'm on about with the free ride stuff, we were calling it Knives to a Gunfight, and there's 2 videos online on YouTube, so if you search Knives to a Gunfight Send, it'll pop up.
Awesome. I'll put a link to that video in the description below for anybody who wants to see this. Knives to a Gunfight. And you can go and check it out. I've certainly seen you and the guys doing some really cool stuff on the Zambezi, which I don't know if I'm brave enough to even attempt, if I'm to be completely honest.
Oh, mate, Zambezi's magic.
Is that the new White Nile for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it really is. And I mean, again, I'm just in love with the place. You know, it's so easy to just go kayaking on sick white water every day that it ticks all the boxes for me.
It is a very, very special place. And if anybody wants to find out more about it, drop me a line or drop Bren a line, and I'm sure we can hook you up with some people, places to stay, and ways to make the Zambezi work for you.
Yeah, mate. And we got to figure it out, dude. I'd love to kayak on that river with you.
It would be amazing. You can see how crap I am these days.
Nah, mate. I'm sure you still got skills, just like riding a bike.
It is. It's not the skills; it's the paddling fitness. I find that's the bit that you that's the bit that I lose quite quickly. I'm old and out of breath, but I've still got a fleet of boats here sat in my yard, so chuck it on the roof of the truck and go up north. For those who don't know, I'm sat in South Africa at this point in time, so the Zambezi is north from me. So, Bren, we're coming towards the end. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to have a rant about something that either upsets you, pisses you off, or absolutely delights you. You'd like to see more of it. But before we do that, who is there you'd like to say thank you to who has made your world possible today?
Oh, mate, there's so many. We'd be here for hours. But to summarize, I mean, family, friends, sponsors. You know, just thanks to everyone for you know, like some people believed in me, other people didn't, but just thanks everyone for being along for the ride and for helping me out in the ways that they did. But yeah, much love to everyone.
Awesome. Any shouts out for any sponsors?
Palm, Piranha, Jewstone, System X, Leighton Vans, you know, just yeah, I think that's just the core companies. And yeah, I'm stoked to be using the equipment. I don't think there's anything better on the market. And yeah, thanks again for all the support.
No worries. All right, you've got 60 seconds to rant about anything that you'd like to. When I say 60 seconds, I'm not going to stop you. If you want to go for 3 minutes, I'm more than happy to listen, because sometimes these rants can get quite amusing. What is that you'd like to get off your chest?
Veganism. Like I eat vegetarian. I don't agree with eating animals, blah blah blah, all these things, but I keep it to myself and I just crack on, because ultimately you should never trust anyone that defines themselves by what they put in their mouth. But some people, the first words out of their mouth will be not their name or anything. It's like, "Hi, I'm vegan." "Oh, sorry, my name's Crystal, but I'm vegan, just so you know." And honestly, these people are the reason why I can't identify with it. So when people ask me what I do for my diet, I can't say vegan or vegetarian or anything, because I have these like, I don't know what you call it, food Nazis or something. And I have these people just trying to force their opinion on other people, so I can't identify with them because I'm not that person. And so I have to like sort of mumble through it, and I'm like, I sort of eat whatever I want, but I don't really eat meat, and I just eat vegetables, and I mostly just eat rice and beans and vegetables. And it'd be a lot easier if I could just say that I am X or I am Y, and I can't because of these people that try and force themselves on other people.
So
That's like counseling.
Most that is the you can carry on if you like as well. But most people, this is the most peculiar answer I've ever had, because most people, when they have like a kayaking thing or a climbing thing or a hiking thing they want to rant about, you've gone off completely off at a tangent. Veganism. I mean, love
mate,
it.
I would guess technically I would be classed as a vegan too. So it's not just someone that eats meat not understanding something. I was just frustrated as a whole of that whole like pretentious force yourself, I'm better than you because I don't eat meat sort of deal, you know. Like the whole point is to just be a conscientious consumer, you know. Just think a little bit about what you're eating, why you're eating it, and where it's coming from, and the world will be a better place. Not everyone has to be a diehard.
That is very true. Have you seen the Netflix documentary, The Game Changers?
Mate, I have, and I hated it at first. Just some of the things they try and attribute, you know, like when they talk about the UFC fight, McGregor versus Diaz, and McGregor losing because he ate steak and Diaz losing because he's plant-based. I was like, no, McGregor lost because he's really explosive. Diaz weathered the storm, and Diaz is an absolute jiu-jitsu savage. He just tied him up and tired him out and won that way. And you can't attribute that to someone's diet in a sport with so much skill and so many external factors. But then I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast where, what was his name? Chris Kessler. He comes on and he defends himself. And have you listened to it?
I have, yeah.
Mate, I think myself, Joe Rogan, I think everyone that doubted the Game Changers listened to that podcast where he disproves everything. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just shut up then. Like he did such a good job of defending himself and making all of his points that he tried to make in the documentary validated. I thought it was stunning work. I honestly, I think the podcast had more of an impact on me than the film, but that's only because of the film. I was like, ugh, it's almost like food propaganda. But then when he comes on the podcast, I'm like, actually, I need to rethink what I just watched and the opinions that I formulated from that.
What do you find the benefit of being a vegetarian or vegan is for you?
It's cheaper. No kidding.
Well, no, but that's a real thing, isn't it? Meat costs a lot more than beans.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, mate, is that I wasn't looking for any health benefits or anything like that. I think that I led a healthy life from a healthy diet when I was eating meat, and now that I don't eat meat, I live a healthy life from a healthy diet. And the biggest thing for me is that I noticed no change whatsoever. And I think that's because I was eating healthy before it, but that was the biggest reason for me to keep going with it. It was like, actually, I now understand how my meat comes to my table, and I'm not comfortable with that, and I can cut it out and feel just as good. Whereas everyone told me that if you want to be an athlete, you've got to eat this meat and this amount of protein and all of that stuff. And I'm like, actually, I feel just the same, just as good not eating meat. So I'll just keep doing that because it makes me feel better about not eating an animal that I'm not comfortable with the way it lived its life. But I think a lot of people get a lot of benefits from turning vegan or vegetarian, because I think that a lot of people live pretty dehydrated and lacking in a lot of minerals. And obviously when you're eating a lot of vegetables, then you get a lot more water intake and you get a lot more minerals. And I think that you get like a little bit of a kick there from something that's been lacking in your diet and your nutrition. And that's why a lot of people that didn't have a healthy diet before it, and they start eating more vegetables and consuming more water, then feel better from it.
Okay. So are you pretty switched on and conscious about what you put inside your body to allow you to keep kayaking? I mean, balancing out partying versus not partying, so on and so forth.
I try to be. I'm definitely getting better as I get older, and figuring out what works for me and what doesn't. I mean, on the partying side of things, there's two things that made a big difference. One is having malaria 8 times, because I now really
Oh.
appreciate I really appreciate just waking up and feeling good in the morning and being able to go about my day. And I don't want to have that ruined by a savage hangover. And the second thing is I really like to look at things from like the core aspects and like put them in like a new framing of light, because a lot of things are framed with marketing or with social acceptances or such like. And when I take drinking and I deconstruct it, I'm like, actually, it just seems a bit of a bad deal. Like if some geezer walked up to you on the street and was like, so I made this poison for 15 pence and I'll sell it to you for £3, right? It doesn't do you any favors and you'll feel terrible the next day. And how about you buy 6 of these for you and your mates and you keep buying them all night? Like you would never take that deal.
That's so true.
And and anyway, when I looked at it that way and then everything, I was like, actually, I'm not that into it. But then at the same time, I'm trying to remember the text. I'll send it you, because there's a really cool poem about it, about drink being a blessing and a curse. I forget who it was written by, but it's an awesome piece of text. But at the same time, drinking is also like it breaks down so many social barriers, and it's such a good way to formulate friendships. And I think that at times it can make you a little bit more creative, like some of my best edits have come from late nights having a whiskey or two, or 3. And I think that it's got its benefits and it's got its negatives, but my biggest thing has been, I'm sure you've had it, like generally speaking, a lot of people will go kayaking on holiday and they'll have a really good day on the water and they'll finish it off with a beer,
Fun.
or a couple
Yep.
drinks, and that will repeat. And then we'll go and then after like 2 weeks we'll leave that holiday and we'll go back to the normal world and we won't drink as much. But for myself, like that was every single day of my entire year. I would go kayaking, everyone would be stoked, we'd go to the pub afterwards, we'd hang out, we'd drink a few beers, and I'm like, I don't know if this drinking every day thing is that good for me. Like if I told my doctor, he'd be like, you have problems.
Yeah, you're an alcoholic.
And you feel, yeah, so totally, but like you feel totally in control of it. I didn't feel it was stopping me from doing anything or anything like that, but I just thought it'd be a good time to like sort of tone it down. And it helps out with the bank balance and the abs and all of that stuff.
I noticed I've done a lot of guiding and coaching in my time, and I noticed with groups of paddlers that maybe I'd take to Austria to the Alps or Switzerland or Italy to the Alps to go, that I'd be their coach or their guide. I'd noticed that most paddlers are only capable of really doing 2 days worth of boating before actually they start to get pretty tired. And that's fair enough, because most people work Monday through Friday, get 2 days at the weekend, and then press reset. And I noticed that in the Alps, when people started throwing beer and wine down their throats every evening, that on like day 3 or day 4, Wednesday or Thursday, the quantity of swims and accidents ramped up dramatically. And it was a direct correlation to lack of sleep, increased level of booze, and a lack of, I suppose, real paddling fitness. And I've had to be unpopular and have some conversations with people on occasions. It's like, you can carry on getting hammered every night, but your expectation of what water we paddle tomorrow may have to be moderated accordingly.
Yeah, but and again, if you deconstruct it and you reframe it, it makes complete and utter sense.
Yeah.
But when it's not deconstructed and it's not reframed, you're like, what do you mean? I'm trying to have the best day ever every day on my holiday that I've worked so hard for to have this time, and I like kayaking, I like drinking, so I'm going to do that every day.
Yeah, what I would say to somebody though who's listening to this is the other thing I've experienced is I had somebody come along for a 10-day boating trip in the Italian Alps, and in Versasca. I'm sure you've been there, that sort of area.
I haven't actually, mate. I've heard a lot about it though.
Oh, that's a super cool playground for May, June time.
Nice.
You should go. And anyway, they gave up. They decided as they got on the ferry to drive from England down to the Alps to come meet me, they decided now was going to be the time they were going to give up their eight-year-old habit of smoking 20 cigarettes a day. And so they got to the Alps and they were already tired and cranky, having not had a cigarette for the best part of 24 hours. And then they're out of breath, and then they're struggling to focus, and then they're just stroppy and can't think. And it's all like... Yeah, so my advice is if you want to moderate something, don't do it on an intense trip that you're doing in the outdoors. Don't decide this is the time to do cold turkey on coffee or caffeine, cigarettes, alcohol, or whatever else, because it can really screw with you.
Yeah, mate, and just so hard to do, like not drinking has been pretty easy, honestly, but not drinking coffee, I don't know if I'd make it for a day.
I went on a trip once with a friend of mine, and on the 3rd day she took the car keys and went and bought me coffee, because I'd left coffee at home, and I'm like, I don't need it, it'll be fine, we're only away for 12 days. And on day 3 she's like, nope, screw this, I'm getting you caffeine.
Magic. Those are the friends you need.
That's it. Okay, I've got 2 questions before we wrap up. What is the advice you would like to give to other paddlers for them to have a better time out when they go boating?
My biggest thing is don't put any pressures on yourself. Like when I meet people on the water, they're trying to aspire to certain things in the sport. Like I want to be a grade 4 kayaker or a grade 5 kayaker or blah blah blah. And my biggest thing is just take it for what it is. It's a beautiful sport with an amazing community, and if you get good at it, awesome. But if you don't get good at it, just taking part is magic as well. And just enjoy it for what it is, which is, in my opinion, one of the sickest, friendliest sports on the planet.
Cool. And what's the never leave at home piece of kit that you can't do without?
Like actual piece of equipment that I would use on water, or lifestyle trip equipment?
I think, no matter what you're doing, it goes with you. So kayaking or not kayaking?
Oh, mate, the Kindle. What a game-changing piece of tech. It's amazing.
Are you a big reader?
Yeah, dude. I normally, it depends how busy I am with work and editing, but I normally smash through at least a book a week. But depends on the book too, because Behave by Robert Sapolsky, that thing took me like 3 months. But yeah, I love reading, and it's hilarious, right? Because I have like a little Supreme man bag. It's like streetwear fashion in the UK. I never thought I'd wear one, but I do, because it's like functional and it works. So I think it looks cool. And these things are wildly known, right? So like people use them to store their drugs in at festivals, and I use mine to put my Kindle and my toothpaste and my phone charger and like all my spare set of headphones in. And I get back from a trip and I'm walking down the streets of Warrington, and like some stuff goes on there, whatever. And I'm walking down the streets with my dogs, which are 2 German Shepherds, and the police stop me, these community support officers, and they're like, "Can we have a look in that bag, please, mate?" And I'm like, "No, don't really have just cause, do you?" And they're like, "Oh no, one of these wankers." And he thinks he's a lawyer, and I'm like, "You know what, lads, go on, I'll make your day. Have a look through this bag. Just promise me not to judge a book by its cover next time." And they look through it. They take everything out: the Kindle, the toothpaste, the spare headphones, the passport, the wallet, the little bit of actual physical money. And then they're checking the seams of the bag for like a secret pocket. Like they think it's a front. Like they think that's like a bluff or a cover, and that there's actually a secret pocket in this bag that has this stash of drugs in it. And it was magic. It was so funny.
That's incredible. What's your must-read book that you want to recommend to people? Have you got one?
Oh, mate, so many. For anyone interested in what would you say? For anyone interested in like decision making and the brain and whatever, I'd really recommend Daniel Kahneman and his book Thinking Fast and Slow, which was a really good breakdown of how the brain operates. And the sequel to that, I think it's by Michael Lewis. It's called The Undoing Project. It's all about him and his partner Amos Tversky, and they're both Iranian professors, absolute badasses, and how they came about to basically revolutionize the way we think about things. Because until they came around, economists and scientists and everyone would base themselves on the principle that humans are logical. And then they disproved everything. They're like, actually, we're a bunch of illogical gits, and we never make decisions that would make sense on paper. And Yuval Harari, his book series, Sapiens, Homo Deus, I forget what the third one is, but that's just amazing to learn more about the human race and where we're from. And oh mate, I could go on forever. There's so many good books out there.
So for a guy who left school at 15, you're into some pretty hardcore reading.
I mean, my biggest thing, mate, as I say this all the time, is like I am addicted to learning and self-improvement. So because basically I want to be the smartest, strongest, fastest, sickest kayaker / human being that I can be. And I think that the big reason I ended up leaving school was, 1, because I was so in love with kayaking, and 2, because I was frustrated with the pace and the learning style. Like I felt like stuff was just being forced down us. Whereas if I decide that I want to commit to learning something, I need to have the reasons why that's good to learn, rather than just like, well, you have to learn it because it's on the test. Why is it on the test? What does this how does this serve a purpose? And why should I commit my brain space and time and effort and energy to learning this?
Cool. Well, Bren, I just want to thank you for a second. I want to thank you for inspiring so many people to get out there and do it, no matter what their version of do it is, from class 2 to bigger waterfalls to whatever else, and for being so friendly and open with yourself and your time when you're about people, and making, I guess, professional kayaker, making the door wide open for people to come and have a chat and a high five and get better. There's not many of you out there, and it inspires me watching your videos on a weekly basis. Cheers,
mate. I really appreciate it. And thanks for watching the videos and for inviting me on the podcast.
No worries. So Bren Orton, thank you for being awesome, and thank you for your time on the We Get Outdoors podcast.
Yeah, mate. Thank you. Have a great year.
Cool. This episode is brought to you by the We Get Outdoors tribe, where your next adventure is just one click away. You can join this, the fastest growing outdoor group on planet Earth, and become part of a tribe of like-minded outdoor enthusiasts, sharing your adventures, their adventures, trips and insights, and helping to ensure you plan and have the most perfect adventures. Click on the link in the description below to join for free right now.